Good afternoon and welcome to another Thrive Tribe podcast. And today we are introducing Carol Hudson from A Touch of Tapping, who is an EFT practitioner. And don't worry, she will tell you all about it as we progress. How are you, Carol?
Very well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, no problem at all. My pleasure. So to start with, tell us about your business story as to how you got to creating A Touch of Tapping.
Well, it's quite an exciting story, really. It happened all by accident, um, although it probably wasn't really. It was meant to be. But tapping itself, I've been doing for just shy of 10 years, probably. And I went looking for tapping because I was looking for something to help the children at school with. So rather than the behaviour policies that were in place meant that, we used restraint and things. I was looking for something to give them that meant that they could manage their own emotions. And I found EFT and I started practicing it. But at that time, I didn't have the business skills or the marketing skills and really didn't know what I was doing. So I just carried on working in schools and used it for family, friends, and schools. So did it that way. Then in March 2024, so a year ago, I started the marketing course. And at the time, it was for something to do. But to do that course, you needed a business so that you could do the tasks. So I had my touch tapping page that I started back in 2016, but didn't really do anything with, and started using that to do the tasks with. And by the end of the marketing course, which was July, I think, it appeared that there might be a viable business there. So then I moved on to the Thrive Tribe Business Bootcamp and started learning the business skills. And by the time we'd finished that in October, and I'd started doing networking and things like that, it was definitely a viable business. And it was time to stop playing at it and do something with it.
No, that's honestly that's wonderful. And I think like so many business owners, whatever product or service you have, you usually start off with friends and family. And that's exactly what you've done, isn't it? You've started getting your teeth into, using the practices that you've learned and put into place with friends and family. And then naturally it's generated a business from there.
Yeah.
You've
And I do have to say at this point that EFT has been a big savior for me as well. It's changed me. I discovered through EFT that I'd been carrying anger around for about 50 years. And because of I did a session with a really experienced practitioner, and she was able to help me, which means that I've been able to come on and do what I can do now.
What does EFT stand for?
It stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. So what it says really, it releases you from the negative emotions, and helps you have more clarity. So, you can deal with challenges in your daily life that, maybe before, if you're suffering from depression or things have gone wrong and you just can't see the wood for the trees. And what tapping does is it helps clear the trees so you can see a way forward.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'd say from growing up, being at school and work and things, mental health back in when I was a lot younger, it was kind of like, it was stigmatized, wasn't it? It was brushed under the carpet. It was, oh, don't necessarily just pull yourself up. But gladly, obviously, over the years, it's become a lot more acceptable. And anyone that has that darker moments in their life and things, there is now a lot of help out there, including what you do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you did allude to the fact that you were a teacher at one point. So I suppose it's only remiss of me to ask you a bit about your background before you started A Touch of Tapping.
Yeah, I've been a teacher for probably 20 some years now. And before that, I was a teaching assistant. And again, that all happened by accident because I'd lived in London and I came back from London after my marriage broke down, and I brought my son back to Lincoln and brought him up here. And I was bored. I got a job. I was working on the market, which was a very nice little job. I was on the sweets and biscuit stall, and it was a nice job, but I got bored really quickly. So my sister was doing a diploma, and she said, "Why don't you come up to the college and see what there is?" So there was a health and social care course. So I signed on to that, and that was the first time they'd ever done it. So we were the guinea pigs for that. I completed that, and during that, I got a placement at Queen's Park School in Lincoln, which was a special needs school. And then through that placement, I actually ended up working there as a TA, which I really, really enjoyed. It was fabulous. Um, but during one of the years I was there, the teacher that I worked with went off sick for a whole term, and they didn't have any supply teachers at the time. So the head called me in at the end of the term and said, "You've done a really good job. I want to put you forward for this course," and put me forward for a foundation degree, which then could end up with a teaching degree. And that turned out to be the first time they'd ever done that as well. So anyway, I said, yeah, okay, let's do it. And I ended up being a teacher. And
Brilliant.
done that.
Yeah, like I often say, sometimes, it's that circumstance you put yourself in, which then leads to something else, doesn't it? And I
Yeah.
like the way that both things that you've done have been by accident. I know the world plays out in funny ways, doesn't it? But it's funny, you've said it twice now. Became a teacher by accident, started a touch of tapping by accident.
There are other things coming in for me with a touch of tapping that I would never have dreamed of, I wouldn't have thought of, but they just appear and they're really good opportunities. So, I'm sort of follow that.
No, brilliant. That's lovely. So, in relation to a touch of tapping, what's your mission with it?
And when I started out, as I said, I was looking for something to help children at school manage emotions, and so that the behaviour didn't escalate to the point where staff had to restrain them. And they have to do that. Sometimes when behaviours do get too big, it has to be done for safety. But I didn't like doing it, and I know a lot of other people who don't like it. So that was the reason I started out. And what I wanted to do was to be able to go into schools and teach, either work with children, because I love doing that, but or teach the staff how to do it so that they could incorporate it into their classrooms. And then if children have got this extra tool in their emotional toolbox, then it's something they can use. It doesn't interfere with learning, but if they can get rid of any big emotions, negative emotions, then it will help clarify the learning, and the learning will be better. So that's what I'd like to do, is to be able to take it into schools and share it there.
I think that's really lovely, because I know from having small children myself, you hear about things that have gone on at school, and you just feel so sorry potentially for the child that's handled something in an incorrect manner. With a technique like what you have, they could potentially simmer down before
Yeah.
boiling point, and before it escalates, and and a scene's made. So yeah, I really really like that.
Yeah, it just needs 5 minutes out. They can take 5 minutes out, which I mean, quite often, my experience in school is if a child is getting het up for any reason, they take 5 minutes outside the classroom. But if they take 5 minutes outside the classroom, but they've got the tapping, they've got a tool, then they can actually calm their body down. Because what it does, it sends a message to the brain that says, you don't have to feel like this. Just that those emotions will go away and you will feel calm again. And that I mean, that's sort of putting it in child speak, shall we say.
No,
So
that's good. That's good for me.
understand, because I could start using big words and things,
No,
but
no,
I'm not sure people are thank me for it.
that's fine. In terms of of what your vision. Obviously, you've already mentioned there you'd like it to be used in schools and obviously like the teachers so they can pass on the knowledge. What's your long-term vision for a touch of tapping?
Long term, do you know what would be really good is if it became embedded in the education system. You know, if we could take it to the councils or to the education department and say, look, we've got this. It needs to be part of your mental health strategies for schools. And, you know, for them to take it on. And then, you know, there'd be more practitioners, not just me, but there'd be people would be able to take it up and down the country. And, you know, and every school would have it as part of their toolkit.
I love that. That would make
Can you
such a
imagine that?
difference as well, wouldn't it? Yeah, honestly, that vision is amazing, and you know, and why not? As I say, if we've got a technique that works, you know, and it can calm people down, make them less anxious, then that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Right behind you
absolutely.
with that. Yeah, thank you. In terms of you gave us a little bit of background about how you got started, and but when did you get introduced to it, and how did it obviously how did it then manifest itself to you actually starting to use it on friends and family before you made it into a business?
When I got introduced to tapping, you mean?
Yeah.
I actually went looking for it. Because I remember being at that school and it was I was I wasn't depressed, but I was not happy, shall we say, because I didn't like the way things were. And I just felt there had to be something better. So I started looking around and, you know, I looked at things like Reiki and other sort of modalities. And then somebody said, have you thought about EFT? And I'm like, what's EFT? You know, and it's so I went on a few websites and I looked at some in London and they looked a bit scary. So I thought, don't want to do that one. And then I looked at a website from a lady called Gwyneth Moss in Yorkshire, who's actually an international trainer, and she trained me. Um, and her website was just so welcoming. And you know, and the way she talked about things, and I just thought I've got to go there. So I booked a weekend with her, and you go for the whole weekend, and there's about 10 of you in a room that go together and learn together. So you do a 2 day weekend for level one, and then I went back and did level two a few weekends later. And then since then, I'm part of ETFI, which is now the training body. But we've got the EFT Guild, which Gwyneth started, which is the EFT community. So it's where practitioners come together and we practice together. And we have something called daisy chains where I'll tap for somebody one week and then they'll tap for me the next week. And it helps us keep our practice up to date.
Okay, so kind of like CPD in of the tapping
Yeah,
world. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
brilliant. That's really good. Can you tell me what kind of customer problems you solve with a touch of tapping and with EFT?
I can tell you some of the ones that I mean, tapping can be applied to anything. We've got practitioners in the guild that some work on weight problems, some work on I've got a lady that works totally with cancer patients and helps them. I prefer to work with children, but although I do work with adults as well. So some of the things I've solved with the children are when they've been bullied at school, when they're not coping with their work, when they're having sleepless nights. Um, and then I had a young lady recently with fear of heights, and you know the family wanted to go on holiday and she was really terrified about getting on the aeroplane. And, you know, so much so she said to her mum, well, I'll stay with grandma and granddad, you can go. And her mum's
Oh,
like, I don't think so. We're either all going or we're not going. So I worked with her and you know, she got on that plane. So there are lots of things. I have worked with, I remember one young lady that I worked with, and sadly, her mum died when she was 10 years old.
oh,
And obviously, you know, we all know that when somebody close to us goes, it's really hard to come back. And bless her, she came back to school after about 2 weeks, and I worked with her like 3 lunchtimes a week, just on a little bit at a time. And she was able to get back into her learning quite quickly, so it was yeah, that was really good, that one.
Yeah, I can't imagine what any child goes through when they lose a parent, but to actually, yeah, to have that impact is amazing, isn't it? To hopefully help her, carry on and and
Yeah.
make a name for herself in her own right. Oh, that's really really good for those examples. Thank you.
So, and I have seen her recently, and she's got herself through secondary school as well, and
Oh,
come out with some
brilliant.
really good grades and things. So
Mm.
I think, I like to think that it was a tapping that helped when it was needed.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Because we always say that you never forget a good teacher. You always remember them, always willing to say
Yeah,
hi. If you honestly, it's definitely
you
true.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Has there been any other examples of profound changes that you've witnessed in students through tapping?
Yes, there was um a young man who he he was struggling with maths at school. This is what he said. Um, and they tried everything. They tried tutors, and he said, "No, I just can't do it. I can't get my head around anything." So his grandma said to me, "Can you work with him for a bit? Can you see if this tapping thing works?" So I worked with him for about 6 weeks, and it turned out that the problem wasn't anything to do with maths or school. It was to do with the fact that he'd been brought up by his grandparents, and very well. Um, but his parents were only 15 when he was born. And the problem, he'd realised that most of his peer group lived with their parents, and his parents were now both in relationship, but neither of them had ever taken him on. He was still with his grandparents, and he was just really struggling to know why this was. So, we tapped on it. Some weeks he didn't want to, but so we did something like picture doodling or things like that. But gradually he was able to work his thoughts out, and the tapping took away the emotions out of it. So um yeah, so he was then, quite successful through school. He's now working, he's got a partner, learning to drive. And he's very well, he's just enjoying himself. He's
Yeah.
okay.
Do you know what the three examples that you gave, just completely different, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? In
Yeah.
terms of what tapping's used for.
But say it can be. We've even got members of the EFT Guild that are out in war zones working
Wow.
with, refugees and people out there. And they work with soldiers for PTSD and things like that.
Wow, that's amazing.
So yeah, it's quite powerful
Yeah, it's
what it can
far
do.
reaching, isn't it, in terms of the
Yeah,
help that it can give. That's
yeah.
brilliant. Well, for those of people that are unfamiliar, obviously with tapping, can you explain a little about how it works?
Yes, absolutely. What it is that there are various points on your face and body, called meridian points, and it it's a holistic way to manage emotions. So what it does is the tapping. It's like and cognitive. It's like talk therapy. So it's like CBT, but with tapping. But you don't actually need to go into great details about everything. So you start with um a setup on this point here, which is the karate chop point, and you have a balancing setup. So even though I can't do this work, I know I'm okay. And you balance it out, and then you work around the points with I can't do this work, and we work on the negative, because it's like so if you cut yourself, you clean out the dirt, wouldn't you, before you put a plaster on it?
Yes.
So with emotional trauma, you don't always see it. It can be there before you realize. So, and this is what causes, it can cause physical pains. If it's left long enough and it's not cleared, then you can get all sorts of things. So what the tapping does is it cleans out the wounds. It's like, oh, Gwyneth called it, it's WD-40 for stress.
I
You know,
like that. Yeah,
it 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 gets rid of the emotional baggage, and then you're able to get rid of that trauma and have some clarity about where you want to go. So whatever memory you get that, of what happened, the memory will still be there, but it won't have any emotion attached to it because you've taken those triggers away. And that's what the tapping does. So it's just various points on your body. Every point has an end point. So, if you've got problems with your stomach or that's where you feel it, you just tap this point here. And it's like, if you've got real frustration with something, it's this point here. So you don't have to use all the points, but we tend to use all the points because then we cover everything.
yeah. No, I like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, most definitely. I think for the people watching the podcast, I think you'll have a lot of people that believe in that, in what you do. But there may be some people who are a little bit disbelieving, like there is both sides to every story. So is there science behind tapping?
Absolutely, there is. Yeah. The scientific evidence is becoming more and more. When I first started, it was more anecdotal than scientific, but there's been quite a lot of work done on brainwaves. So, and people have had, sort of these little hats on with the
Yeah,
electrodes and things, so that they've done tapping sessions, and you can see because you've got 5 brainwaves, and you can see that the when you've done the tapping, it brings you back to the alpha brainwave, which is calm. So you've got beta brainwave, which allows you to do active things. But if they get overstimulated, then this is where the anxieties and things like that start. So when you've been tapping, the brainwave research that they've done shows that that reduces and the alpha waves take over, which is the calming wave. Um, if you go on the EFT International site, there is a lot of scientific research that will tell you how it works there. So
brilliant. Just yeah, just
it
for
would
those
take too
people
long
that
to try and explain.
no, that's all right. No,
I'm
but
not
no,
even
it's
sure
always
I know
nice.
it all.
It's always nice to hear the science behind things and and the
Yeah,
story behind them. So,
there is getting more and more science behind it now that people can actually, because there are personalities, aren't there, that like to know the detail,
yes,
whereas other people will just trust that it'll do it.
yes,
But you people are what they are,
yeah.
so we sort of have to try and help everybody, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, funny you mention that. So, is there any age groups that specifically benefit from tapping, or can it be adapted for any age? Obviously, you've mentioned the younger end of the scale. Is it
Yeah.
just for that age group, or is it all the way through?
No, it's below 8 and over 80 and anything in between.
Brilliant. So
So,
literally
and
anybody
that's
and
the Gwyneth
everybody.
quote again.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, it's good. Don't worry. And I think obviously you mentioned like the war-torn countries as well, didn't you, in terms of helping the soldiers and the people over there who are struggling. So yes, that just goes to prove between 8 and 18, anybody in between. I like
And anybody in between, yeah.
that.
So
And when
I
you
mean,
start
obviously,
having,
for very young children, there is a technique called surrogate tapping. That so you, for a very young child, you work with the parent about the child,
yeah,
but it seems to have the same effect. It's magic.
that's good. I'll take magic. Magic that plays a purpose and helps people. I think is really good. So in terms of when you start to see somebody, is it like on a session basis or a program? Is there like an average time that it takes to help, or how does it work in terms of that?
It depends what the issue is. Sometimes it can work within 5 minutes. Sometimes you can do an hour session and then suddenly the person will notice a shift the next day. And sometimes you need 3 or 4 sessions or maybe even more, depending on how big the issues are. Because the thing is with tapping, you have to be specific with what you're working on. So if you imagine a tabletop, that can be the general problem. That's what they'll come to you with. But then what you have to do is break it down. So if you think about the table legs, each table leg will be an aspect. So we work on aspects, and you have to keep with that aspect because then you can clear the trauma of that. And then when you've done that one, then you move on to the next one. So if they've come to you with a huge problem, um, then you know it might take you 3 or 4 table legs to clear the tabletop, sort of thing.
I like that analogy. No, that's really, really good.
So
And is there anything that you could do with like parents, or teachers that they can easily incorporate into their actions with the children? I just think, um, obviously, I've got 4 children, and one of them is quite hot-headed, and is quite emotional sometimes. So, is there anything that you could teach the parents to do with the children? When that emotion rises.
the simple basic technique, just tapping around the points. I have a card that that I can give to people that shows them where the tapping points are. And the thing is, for children, it's easy for them to learn. It's easy for mum and dad to learn. It's easy for the children to learn, and the children quite enjoy it because they're tapping. It's like it's sensory as well, so they've got their own touch. But so if they just tap and talk, they don't actually have to tell you what's wrong with them. They can just mutter to themselves while they're tapping around the point. And um and it's quite nice for them because I say they've got that sensory feeling. So it will feel calming for them just to have that. But it's simple to learn. Kids like it.
That's really, really good. I shall definitely consider that going forward for one of my little cherubs. Um, and obviously, I've known you a while now, and I know some of the wonderful work that you've done and the feedback that you've had. But just in terms of this podcast, is there any examples of the feedback you've been given by parents or teachers after children have learned their tapping techniques?
Um, yeah, I mean the the young lady I told you with the who was didn't think she was going to get on that aeroplane. Her mum was just so like, this has really helped us because we were able to go on holiday. And a couple of the adults that I've worked with, as well, it's sort of been there was one lady, and her mum had died, and she coped with that, and she was okay with that. But then she found that she couldn't get going again, and she said, I don't know what to do. So we just sat down for, I don't think it was even an hour, and I just used her words, and I said, well, where do you want to start? She said, I need to get going. So we just tapped on, I need to get going. And then, that sort of led through. And then she realized where the block was and what a problem was. And she messaged me the next day and she said, I'm up and I'm out there and I'm doing it. And it was like, it was just whatever it had blocked, she was just able to just release it. And she got up the next day and off she went. And, as far as I know, she's thriving very well.
That's brilliant. And I going back to the young girl that couldn't fly. I know her as well, and a few of us that know Carol and the work. One of the nicest things that I've seen for a long time was a photo on the airplane. So as they got on the airplane before they flew, and the young girl was on the airplane, very, very happy, window seat, big smile over her face, and
it was amazing, wasn't it?
A picture paints 1,000 words, and that just said all the hard work you've done. And now they're looking to go on a more frequent basis abroad. So those interactions you had with her before she flew, the
One
testament is
thing,
there.
in when I was in school, because I do sometimes find that not all teachers will engage with it. But at the last school I was at, there was one teacher, and actually she was the deputy head, And I showed her what I did, and she said, "Oh, that's fine, just do it." And one day I saw her in the corridor with a young lad who I know was always in trouble. And I also know that his home life wasn't great, so he didn't have a lot of discipline. And I just watched her, and she just got down on her knees and tapped with him and showed him how to do it. And he just stopped and looked at her, when she started doing this, and he just stopped and looked at her. And then he did it with her. And it was just like, normally you'd have to run and catch him, but and it was one of the nicest things I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's
But
amazing,
yeah,
isn't it? The changes are magical.
yeah,
Well,
rather than having to chase them through the school and catch them, you could
yeah,
sort of, you can do this and you can have this.
yeah. No, that's brilliant, Carol. Thank you very much. Well, we're about the end of our time, but before I go, I've been asking all of our guests. So, for people thinking about setting up their own business, accidental or not, what advice do you have to give to people that are potentially looking to turn a hobby or an interest into a business?
Do it.
Yeah,
Do it. Because, I mean, because you've gone through, at least since last July, you've gone through this journey with me. Um, that when I started the marketing course, it was just, well, I'll do this because until something else comes up. And then by the time I got to the end of it, and then I thought, well, yes, I need the business skills. So let's carry on and do that. And even then, it was like, can I really do this? And then it started because I started going out networking. Um, and you supported us with that really well. And that has been where I'm getting a lot of my business from. But it's also given me a lot more confidence, to be able to just go out there and say, this is me. And then when we sort of got to coming up to about Christmas time, and after Christmas, I'm like, you're not playing at this anymore. This has just got real. You've got to start being really business-like. But actually, I haven't had to be really, but I've just got to know what I want and let the people around me know what I want, and just try and get out there and help people. But I would say to people, yes, if you've got the opportunity, take it.
brilliant.
Because
Thank you, Carol.
it's the best thing.
Yeah, and then for like a business like yours, literally you've helped hundreds of people now. So it is literally that small service or product that you offer, that small acorn into the big tree, and
Yeah.
you've given the examples there. There's obviously dozens of examples you could have given, but just that the changes that you're making in people's lives, I think is really special. So
Yeah.
yeah, keep
And
doing
while
what
I'm
you're doing.
helping them, it's helping me,
Yeah,
because I've
definitely.
got a far better life now than getting up and going to school at 8 o'clock in the morning and coming home at 5 o'clock or whatever. I mean, um, I've got variety of my days. I'm still helping people, and I'm just really enjoying it.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Uh,
Well, Carol, thank you very much. We've come to the end. So thank you for joining us on this podcast. All your contact details will be below on the links. And then thank you very much, Carol. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time too. Thanks for
All right.
having me.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.